Welcome to Pacific Crest Trail Association's annual meeting. I'm Liz Bergeron, and I'm the Executive Director and CEO, and I'd like to thank you all for attending. And today, I'm speaking to you from our main office in Sacramento. And I recognize that we are all tuning in from many different places, likely across the country. But I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the Sacramento area was and still is the tribal land of the Nisenan people. And since our mission is all about the Pacific Crest Trail, I would also like to acknowledge that the Pacific Crest Trail runs through the homelands of many indigenous nations. And to learn more about which indigenous homelands the PCT travels through, you can now find that information on our online interactive map located on our website at pcta.org. So we had close to 500 people register for this meeting, and it looks like we have about 100 people who are now logged in online. And just want to offer our warmest welcome and appreciation to all of you. I know that we have volunteers and donors, we have members, our many partners, and I'd like to give a special shout out to some of our colleagues. And on the next slide, thank you, Scott. Especially want to welcome our colleagues from the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, and California State Parks. It's great to have you with us today. So over the next hour, we're going to take care of our annual meeting business. We're going to talk about our results from the interesting year that was 2020. And we're going to also talk a little bit about 2021 and what lies ahead. We'll be answering questions from you, and we have received some of those questions in advance. And you also have the ability to ask questions as we go today. There should be a Q&A tab button, depending on what kind of device you're using, but Zoom does offer a Q&A feature in which you can type in your questions, and we have somebody monitoring those, and we'll be forwarding those to me. And we're going to do our best to answer as many of those questions as we can, as well as throughout the presentation, address some of the questions that were submitted in advance. So, for example, here was one of the questions that was submitted in advance. How has the pandemic affected the organization and trail maintenance? So you will hear more about that throughout our presentation today. So I would like to share just a little story before I turn this over to Rick. I think one of the biggest impacts of the pandemic, of which there were many, is our inability to connect in person. And I really miss that. And about a couple weeks ago, I recruited my neighbor to come into the office and volunteer because we had a lot of work that needed to be done, and she was handy. And she doesn't know that much about the Pacific Crest Trail. So when she first got here, I was telling her about the trail, and I was using a display that we have that has a map, and I found myself just getting so excited. And I realized, gosh, that's part of what I've missed. Is I have spent the last year largely at my desk, and I haven't had the opportunity to introduce people to the trail and to our work. So it's just just one small piece of the difference that it's been for those of us who work on behalf of the Pacific Crest Trail. All right, so now I'd like to introduce Rick Thalhammer, and Rick is the chair of PCTA's Board of Directors. Rick?
Okay, thank you, Liz. And to all of you listening, I'd certainly like to echo Liz's welcome to each of you. This is an awkward annual meeting to do by remote videos, but this is our second shot at it, and so off we go. Our bylaws require us to hold an annual membership meeting each year for the purpose of transacting such business as may come before the meeting. No items were presented by the board for action at this meeting. And so we have no official business to conduct, and we're not required to have a quorum today. Excuse me. Per Article 4, Section 4A of the bylaws, date for the purpose of determining which members are entitled to notice of any members' meeting shall be the business day preceding the date on which notice for that meeting is given, unquote. This notice was mailed in the Communicator magazine on March 5th and be a postcard to members who don't receive the magazine on March 26th, with the record date for determining membership of March 4th. An additional notice was sent via email on April 1st. These notice dates are in compliance with the bylaws just read, which state in Article 4, Section 5, as well, that notice shall be delivered not less than 20 nor more than 90 days before the date of such meeting. Moving on to the results of our board election, as stipulated in our bylaws, board member elections are conducted only by written ballots sent to the entire membership. Ballots were distributed to members in the Communicator magazine, which was mailed on March 5th. As of April 16, 2021, we received 180 ballots from confirmed current members. As we received more than 50 ballots, the 7 candidates receiving the greatest number of votes have been elected. Directors serve 3-year terms and can serve 3 full terms consecutively before they must leave the board for at least a year before being eligible to be elected again. Jennifer Appleton, excuse me, who was appointed by the board to fill a vacancy on the board in January, has been elected to a first term with 171 votes. Gabe Gunglin has been elected to a second term with 170 votes. Excuse me again. Diane Daly Larson, who was appointed by the board to fill a vacancy on the board in January, has been elected to a first term with 170 votes. Vicki Kellerman has been elected to a second term with 172 votes. Elizabeth Dorsey, who was appointed by the board to fill a vacancy on the board in January, has been elected to a first term with 173 votes. John Remmers, who was appointed by the board to fill a vacancy on the board in January, has been elected to a first term with 168 votes. And Don Rouse has been elected to a third term with 166 votes. So thank you to our newly elected directors. At this point, thank goodness for my bad voice, the business of the annual meeting having been concluded, we are adjourned. And now Liz will take over the presentation of accomplishments and plans for the future.
Thank you, Rick. PCTA's Board of Directors plays such a critical role in guiding the organization, and I really appreciate the work that our board does. So thank you to those board members who are attending today. Really appreciate your work. All right, so one of the questions that was asked, as I mentioned, was about the pandemic. And, you know, as we know, this past year was challenging for all of us. And in March of 2020, while our nation and the world realized that we were experiencing this unprecedented pandemic, we advised all long distance PCT travelers to cancel or postpone their trip and leave the trail if they had already started. Now, a lot of people were under the impression that the trail was closed at that time, but the trail was not actually closed. This was our suggestion, our strong suggestion that we made to long distance travelers. And especially at that time, there were just so many unknowns about the pandemic. And we knew the heartbreak this would cause. It was a really hard thing to do. We know that there are so many who had planned for this trip for so long, and we were really grateful that the majority of the long distance travelers did follow the state and federal guidelines and stayed off the PCT. At the same time, we had to halt all the volunteer trail maintenance projects along the trail and cancel our in-person trainings, such as Trail Skills College. For so many organizations and businesses across the country and around the world, 2020 was devastating financially. You know, so many people lost their jobs and businesses were not able to continue their work. And it could have been the same for PCTA. Fortunately, we took the steps that we needed to right away and cut our budget down to just those items necessary to continue all of the other work that we do besides trail maintenance. And we also continued our outreach to you, members of our community. And your passion for the Pacific Crest Trail and your support for our mission to protect and preserve the trail really came through in this difficult year. And we're so grateful to all of you. So in 2020, our total revenue from private sources was actually up a bit over the prior year of 2019, and we raised $2.7 million. I think it's really important to note that of this 2.7 million that we raised in private contributions, 76% of this was from individuals. And whether that gift was a $35 gift from you or a much larger gift, it all makes a difference. Because we have this broad base of passionate individuals, we were able to weather that storm of the pandemic with a very positive outcome for our organization financially. In addition to the private contributions, we received $800,000 in revenue through our cooperative agreements with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. So our total revenue was $3.5 million. Now, to that, we need to add the value of our volunteer hours, and we did have a significantly reduced number of volunteer hours. However, the 30,000 hours that our volunteers put in amounts to a value of just over 800,000. So our complete revenue for 2020 was 4.3 million that we were able to put to work for the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. And as a result, we ended the year on budget, on our revised budget, with a small surplus and entered 2021 in a good financial position so that we can ramp up again and get as much work possible as much work done as possible for the trail this year. Audited financial statements, which have a lot more detail than what I've just presented, are available online on our website at pcta.org. Those were approved by the board this morning, and so they were just recently posted. The next part of our work I'd like to mention is our advocacy work. This is work that goes on year-round, regardless of things like the pandemic. Now, fortunately, just prior to March of 2020, we made our annual trip to Washington, D.C. We refer to this as Hike the Hill, and we joined trail groups from across the country in an event that's sponsored by American Hiking Society and the Partnership for the National Trails System. Staff and volunteers from PCTA were joined by student volunteers and teachers from the Environmental Charter School in Lawndale, California. And we were able to call on many members of Congress from California, Oregon, and Washington and talk to them about the importance of funding for the Pacific Crest Trail. At the same time, we're able to sit down face-to-face with our Washington, D.C. offices of the agency partners, such as the Forest Service, Park Service, and the Bureau of Land Management. And it's just a great opportunity to continue to strengthen the partnerships we have with these agencies and also our relationships with members of Congress. So another highlight in 2020 was the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act. And there were two pieces of this act in particular that will have a huge impact on the Pacific Crest Trail. And that is the permanent funding for the Land and Water Conservation Fund at the level of $900 million. And this is a fund that has been used to protect tens of thousands of acres of land along the PCT. Also included in this act is funding for deferred maintenance. And as we know, not just because of the pandemic year, but prior to that, there's plenty of deferred maintenance to be tackled on the PCT. There will be funding, or there is funding, for the Forest Service for the PCT in the as a result of the Great American Outdoors Act. And we'll be able to take advantage of those funds working together with our partner, the Forest Service, over the next several years and really get a lot of work done on the trail. So the advocacy work is kind of an example of the work that I always like to refer to trail maintenance as our core business. But in addition to trail maintenance, we have a lot of other programs, and you're going to hear more about that later today. So let me talk a little bit about land protection, or the funding that comes from the Land and Water Conservation Fund to help us acquire land for the PCT. So we've been using the number 10% of the trail is still on private land. And I do promise you that that number will decrease one of these days. There's still a lot of land and a lot of individual parcels that need to be acquired to complete the stronger or permanent protection of the trail. And PCTA has been working at this for a number of years to be a good partner to the Forest Service, to be a good partner to the BLM and others along the trail to acquire the land that needs to be acquired. And so in 2020, we acquired 2 parcels that included about a half a mile of the PCT for a total of 15 acres. And these are the kind of projects that we are well positioned to act quickly, make the acquisition happen, and then turn around and transfer those to the Forest Service when time allows. But we've also had 5 years of just incredible successes. So we thought, since this is the 5-year anniversary of ramping up our land acquisition efforts, that we would include information in the next few slides about what we've been able to accomplish over the last 5 years. And it's pretty significant. So not only have we been able to be involved in these smaller, sometimes 5-acre parcels, when you look at it in total, it's been pretty significant. So, 23,000 acres, 30 miles of the PCT. And, in addition to protecting the trail and the lands around it, which we do use a combination of public and private funding, it's not just about the trail. We've also protected 13 alpine lakes, 52 miles of streams, and habitat for special status plant and animal species. And none of this would be possible without your generous support. So our goal is to continue this until every mile of the PCT is permanently protected. And we have some current projects in the works. We can't announce yet, but stay tuned. We hope to announce later this year some other exciting projects that we'll be working on in our land protection program. So in 2020, as if the pandemic wasn't enough, the West experienced some incredible fires. Mega fires in August and September burned over 10 million acres, and the PCT was not spared in these wildfires. At the height of the fires, our federal agency partners did close the PCT in that the forests were closed. So this included over 1,800 miles of the trail, and we estimate that roughly 90 miles of the trail overall burned in 2020. So many of you have asked when these sections of the trail will be reopened, and the unfortunate answer is we don't know yet. Because in some places, like in the Mount Jefferson Wilderness in Central Oregon, the trail that burned is still under snow. And so we have a lot of work to do to get in and assess the damage. So that information will be forthcoming. So the other thing that I'd like to mention is another topic that has gained increased awareness in our country in 2020, and that is social justice. So following the murder of George Floyd, as protests swept across the nation, many other organizations like ours took strong public stances in support of greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors. And many in our community have asked and are continuing to ask, what does any of this have to do with the PCT? Well, the answer is that people of color came forward and told us that they don't always feel safe or welcome on the trail. And this caused great concern and concerns us deeply, because our mission is more than simply to protect, preserve, and promote the trail. We protect the trail for the benefit and enjoyment of people, of all people. And as the leading advocate for the PCT, it's our responsibility to do what we can to make sure that the trail is equally enjoyable to all. So for more information on work in this area, I encourage you to visit our website for a recent blog post about what we're doing and about the progress that we've made. So in just a minute, I'm going to hand this over to Jennifer Tripp, and she's going to talk more about trail operations. After that, you're going to hear from Jack Haskel, our trail information manager, Angie Williamson, our director of philanthropy, and then towards the end of the meeting, we'll be presenting some awards and having time for questions. So with that, I'm turning it over to Jen.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's great to have so many people coming and joining to hear about our work. As Liz mentioned, 2020 was a very challenging year on a number of fronts. Scott, can you advance my slide to the next one? Thanks. So it was a very challenging year, especially for our volunteer programs and our trail maintenance efforts. We all miss being out on the PCT, whether that's hiking or doing trail maintenance projects or bird watching or hiking to your favorite fishing spot. We also miss, as Liz mentioned, connecting with people, and the volunteers miss connecting with each other. Luckily, our PCT volunteers are extremely passionate and extremely dedicated, and worked through the challenges of last year with COVID protocols and fire. So many thanks to our volunteers for their patience and their perseverance last year. Despite the challenges, we were able to accomplish a limited amount of trail maintenance last year. Most of this work was in Oregon and Washington, where the forests quickly allowed volunteers back in after COVID we learned more about COVID in the spring, and by summer, folks were back out on the trail. In California, many places, though, we weren't allowed out on the trail all year due to COVID, and we're not sure when we'll be able to get back out this year even. But again, despite that, we were able to get some good work done. Of note, we were able to have 2 important bridges reinstalled last year in the Northern Sierra. It was kind of interesting timing. These bridges had been out for a long time. In one case on the Chips Creek, it had been many, many years, almost a decade plus, I think. And then another one at the Echo Lake outlet. And so we're really excited about that. We also wanted to recognize our partners who continued to persevere through last year. So Washington Trails Association, Tahoe Rim Trail Association, as well as our partners at ACE, American Conservation Experience, all contributed to work on the trail. We know the backlog of maintenance is still large. We didn't get to what we planned to last year, but our staff and our volunteers are already out doing trail maintenance in many, many locations. And we're planning lots of work for this summer in the trail maintenance realm. Many of you have asked what we're doing to help take care of that backlog. And in addition to the fabulous work that our volunteers do, we're also planning just starting next week, our core crew season with our core crew partners. And we have more than 80 weeks of core crew time planned up and down the entire length of the PCT for 2021. So we're excited for them to get out and help take care of the backlog of maintenance. Next slide, please. One of the things that we did last year when the pandemic hit is we pivoted. We were not able to do online or in-person trail skills colleges. And so we ramped up what we were able to do online. And so one way we were able to connect was by hosting 7 online trail skills trainings. We also hosted a whole series of tabling and education training and had more than 200 volunteers participate in those training opportunities. We also held monthly crew leader question and answer sessions that started with COVID, but they were a really nice way to connect on a regular basis with our volunteer leaders. And we've continued to do those as COVID has slowed down, and we're expanding the topics beyond COVID to give regular updates to our volunteer leader community. We also hosted a lot of online socials and award presentations last year as a way to connect. And as Liz mentioned, it doesn't substitute for being out there in person with our community, but it was nice to be able to connect virtually at least. So thank you to all of you who participated in any of our online engagement last year. Next slide. Also of note, I wanted to highlight is our Portland-based Mount Hood chapter volunteers and their work on the Eagle Creek Trail. And so the Mount Hood chapter takes care of not only the PCT, but also other trails in the Columbia River Gorge, including Eagle Creek, which is a popular PCT alternate. And in September of 2017, the Eagle Creek fire closed this trail. And in January of this year, it was finally reopened after the work of our talented volunteers over the course of several years. And it took our volunteers more than 60 projects to get out and restore this section of trail. They put in over 6,000 hours. They rehabbed 28,000 feet of trail in those 60 plus projects. They removed more than 170 logs to get this trail open. And so we were really excited about that and wanted to recognize their work. Unfortunately, within 2 weeks, another landslide came on the Eagle Creek Trail and closed it again. But our volunteers are hard at work again getting this popular trail back open. Since the beginning of 2021, they've already done more than 30 trail projects on the Eagle Creek section. So a big thanks to our Mount Hood chapter for their hard work and dedication on getting the Eagle Creek Trail open. And my next slide magically appeared. Thank you, Scott. Next up, I just wanted to take a minute to recognize our North 350 Blades volunteer group. And this group is out of Seattle. And they started in 2010 with PCT hikers Barry Teschlog and Jim Miller. And since their first year in 2010, when they put in 400 volunteer hours, they have grown the group and the chapter to more than 8,500 volunteer hours that they contributed last year. So despite COVID and the fire challenges, they had a great season to celebrate their 10th anniversary. So congratulations to Barry, Jim, and all the North 350 Blades members they've recruited on their success of growing that group. Next slide. Thanks, Scott. So I just wanted to put our the web address up here for our volunteer opportunities. So we receive a lot of questions about how people can get involved, how you can learn more about volunteering, what it entails. And so please go ahead and check out our website. This is our volunteer area. We have lots of information on these pages, including a project calendar where you can take a look and see what weekends you're available or what days you have open and sign up for a volunteer project. We have training materials on that page. We have a place where you can also sign up for our email list and get regular updates from us about opportunities or how to volunteer. So please check that out. We'd love to have you become part of our volunteer community. Next up, I know Liz touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to highlight some about the wildfire impacts from last season. Just as we thought we were getting COVID figured out and getting volunteers back out on the trail, we were hit with a pretty incredible fire season that did impact our ability to do maintenance last year. As a matter of fact, for the first time ever, we had to cancel the end of our core crew season early. We just ran out of places where we could move a core crew because of the fire and the smoke impacts. And so there are currently still just about 70 miles of the PCT closed. And these are in 3 big fire areas, the Lion's Head fire and the Lakes fire, 2 different fires on the Angeles. Oh, sorry, the Lion's Head's on up in Oregon. So the Lion's Head fire up in Oregon is still closed, and then the Lake fire and the Bobcat fire on the Angeles are also still closed. We are planning to do work in the Bobcat fire area in 2021. We've received some dedicated funding from the Forest Service to help with restoration there, and look forward to having core crews and volunteers out doing that work. Due to the extensive damage and the hazards, and as Liz mentioned, the snowpack, we haven't really been able to assess the Lake fire nor the Lion's Head fire yet. But as soon as we get access, we'll be able to go out there and take a look and see what's on the ground and develop plans for restoration. So stay tuned for more opportunities there. Next slide. Briefly wanted to touch on something that's not specific to trail operations, but really affected the whole organization. Many of you have been hearing these updates from us, but we have, with the support of a large private grant and many private donations, PCTA, starting last year and then implementing this year, we went through a large technology upgrade. We converted our main database, which was almost 15 plus years old, to a new cloud-based Salesforce database system. Our staff have spent a lot of time working with developers to build something to meet our needs. And this new database affects every part of our work. Every program in the organization is using our new Salesforce database, which we're really excited about. One of the highlights is something that we're calling PCTA Connect. It's an online portal for our volunteer community. It streamlines and modernizes our processes. Volunteers have their own logins and their own accounts. They can register for projects, manage their profile. And for our volunteer leaders, they have the ability to better manage their projects, see who's signed up for their projects, see how many slots they have open to fill. So we're pretty excited about that and hearing great things from our volunteer community, as well as our staff who are using the new system. And with the technology upgrade, we've welcomed 2 new staff, particularly in the technology realm, to our PCTA family this year. So we were able to add a database administrator to help with the new Salesforce database, as well as a new GIS specialist who is doing some pretty cool things for us with mapping technology, which Jack Haskel will touch on a bit more. Next slide, please. And even though the pandemic had an impact last year to trail maintenance, our trail protection work never really stops. We are on a day-to-day basis monitoring more than 100 projects and recreation, forest plans, resource management plans. And last year we commented on more than 40 projects. Some of those included forest planning efforts, over snow vehicle travel management, energy development up and down the trail, the California high-speed rail, as well as some regulations regarding e-bikes. And so many of these projects are very long-term projects. 5 to 15 years is kind of an average on what we spend on some of these. And many of the projects are longer than that as well. So like the bridge over the Klamath River, that's much needed. There's a bridge that pedestrian lane on the Bridge of the Gods that we'd like to see happen, and Togan Ranch. These projects have all been going for many, many years in the 15 plus range. And so we do track on these very closely and make sure that they're moving forward in the best interest of the trail and the experience. Next slide. Next slide, Scott. Thank you. Then I just wanted to touch last a little bit on our visitor use. And so with the pandemic in 2020, most of our programming was suspended related to visitor use. We have a trailhead host at the Southern Terminus, and unfortunately they were sent home after just a couple of weeks of volunteering with us. And as we head into 2021, and now that we know more about COVID safety, we are able to re-engage with these visitor use programs. And so we have trailhead hosts, volunteer trailhead hosts actively working at the southern terminus. And in a few weeks, they'll move up to Kennedy Meadows. We also were able to re-engage with the Forest Service to have crest runners along the trail. As pictured on the slide, our register program is up and going this year. So we're monitoring use actively along the trail this year and re-engaging in those programs. Jag Haskel, our trail information manager, will touch a bit more on our permits and give you that information. Next up, though, I will hand it off to Togan Capozza, the acting PCT administrator for the Forest Service.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with all of you today. Over the last year together, we've faced challenges. Next slide, please, Scott. Over the last year together, we've faced challenges we've never seen before. The global pandemic, record numbers of people visiting public lands in many places, including the PCT, and a truly unprecedented wildfire season. First and foremost, I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to PCTA staff, members, the board, and volunteers on behalf of the Forest Service for all of the good work that's been completed over the last year, despite the challenges. Thank you for your partnership, persistence, and commitment. The last year has brought change to our work in many ways. We found new ways to work together in the face of the pandemic, and it wasn't always easy, but you were flexible and patient as we all learned together. Thank you. And speaking of change, I'd be remiss to not mention the recent retirement of my exceptional colleague and longtime Pacific Crest Trail Administrator, Beth Boyce, and to acknowledge the legacy she has left for the trail and to all of us through her leadership. I'd also like to spend just a couple of minutes to share a couple of exciting opportunities for the PCT in the coming year. Next slide, please. The first is the Great American Outdoors Act. We heard earlier from Liz about how this relates to the PCT. I'd like to just spend a few moments on the legacy restoration component of the Act. This is the part that authorizes funding focused on reducing deferred maintenance. And in 2021, the Pacific Crest Trail successfully competed for funding to support 96 crew weeks to work on deferred maintenance in California. I'll say that again, 96 weeks of crews along the trail. This work will be accomplished in partnership with PCTA, American Conservation Experience, and the Student Conservation Association. And it's a really exciting opportunity for the trail. We've also applied for similar funding or funding to support similar work along the PCT in Washington and Oregon, beginning in fiscal year 2022. And we should hear about the status of that funding in the coming months. Next slide, please. Another opportunity I wanted to mention briefly is the Forest Service 10-Year Trail Challenge. Many of you are probably already familiar with this. It isn't new. It was identified in 2017 as part of the Forest Service's National Strategy for a Sustainable Trail System and was officially launched last year in 2020. What is new is that this spring a technical guidebook was released, and this really provides a roadmap for how to implement the challenge. So I wanted to highlight this because I think you can expect to hear more about the challenge in the coming months as forests work to roll it out and how we can work together. The thumbnail version is that the Trail Challenge was established to focus the collective efforts of employees, partners, and volunteers during the next decade to develop efficiencies, increase capacity, reduce roadblocks, and lead to a more sustainable trail system. So it sounds familiar, right? It sounds a lot like the approach we're already taking in our partnership along the PCT. So I think the Trail Challenge really brings an opportunity to highlight and build upon the work that we're already doing together. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Jack Haskel, PCTA's Information Manager. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jack Haskel. I'm the Trail Information Manager for PCTA, and I'm at my home in Sacramento. Next slide, please. So as we learned about the pandemic towards the beginning of 2020, as Liz said, the message became stay at home, stay safe. That's what public health guidance was. And during that time of crisis, it was amazing to see the nation turn to trails and nature. As restaurants closed and offices closed, millions of Americans headed outside. And next slide, please. Pretty quickly, we shifted from asking long distance hikers to get off the trail because the pandemic started really at the beginning of their season to by late May, the message was stay local, get out, go hike, go backpacking, but don't visit communities that aren't your own. Head home when you're out of food, but it is a good thing for us to be exercising, for us to be outside under the sun in the rain. Pretty remarkable increase in visitor use. That brings us to this year, where after a lot of collaboration between PCTA and the Forest Service and the state governments as well, the message is get out, but just manage the risk. Social distance, wear masks, have fun. We're welcoming back long distance hikers. They're out there in Southern California now. This is really the height of the season for getting started. But I would say that we are missing the international hikers this year. By and large, many of them are not allowed to travel to the United States to experience this magical trail. So it is a different year, but a feeling of returning back to normal. Next slide, please. The largest piece of news about permits on the PCT is one of those projects that's many years in the making, Central Oregon's wilderness permit system changes. It was postponed in 2020 and now is being implemented in 2021. The big picture is that there's a new permit system in wilderness areas in Central Oregon. I'd like you to know about it, plan ahead. There are quota permits. Travel across wilderness areas on the PCT is still allowed. Holders of long distance PCT permits don't need to get additional permits. Another big project that PCTA did was to demystify local permit information. We're continually pushing to remind everyone that the trail is about more than just through hikes. And as we care about making the trail relevant and accessible for all of these new people and diverse audiences, providing details of how do you get a permit? Where is a permit required? Where is a permit not required? So that you all can get out and enjoy the PCT. 2021 long distance permits, the permits that we administer on behalf of the federal government agencies, the short of it is that they're filling a little bit slower than in years past. But I think that we will fill up. And that is one of the new things that this year the Forest Service decided to hold use at previous levels, 8,000 permits. We still have long distance permits available. Another system change that happened this year was expanding the southern zone 50 permit per day limit from the southern 100 miles to the southern 1,000 miles, so as to better protect from overuse. Same issue that was going on in Central Oregon, just explosion of use, which by and large is a great thing. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, I'll go on. So education is a primary piece of keeping people safe and happy and having a good experience and protecting the trail. This year is a drought year in California and parts of Oregon, pretty wet up north, and wildfires are easily the most important piece of our messaging for the year. Don't start new wildfires, of course. Make sure you drown all campfires with water, but also be really careful in previously burned areas. And if new wildfires crop up, go to our website, pcta.org, and read how to respond to those. Pandemic is also a big piece of education. You can find ultimate social distancing on the PCT, but please stay away especially if you're unvaccinated from others, and camp alone. It's a good year for self-reliance. This year, I would also really like to mention Trevor Microsoft Leher, who passed away on the PCT last March. He fell on steep snow, and his father, Doug, has been such a champion for spreading the message of safe snow travel, especially, but also just wilderness risk management. And it's a tragic thing for our community to lose Trevor, and we're very grateful for Doug for turning this into something that's productive. The last piece that I'll mention has, I'm just so excited about our interactive map, so I do want to encourage you to go to it. This is an example of the drumbeat of technology. We are just getting started with all this new mapping, and it's great. So make sure you get in there and print out maps and change layers and look at the native lands and the weather and things like that. Thank you all for your support. I'm going to pass it on to Angie.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Well, I just wanted to say that I really miss seeing everybody in person. Instead of looking at rows of smiling people today, I'm looking at my computer screen, as so many of us have been doing this year. But on the upside, by holding this meeting virtually, we have members who are here today from beyond our Northern California region. We have people who registered for the event today from 13 countries and 34 states. So it's really exciting to have such a strong national and global audience. And I'm really glad you could join us to learn how your contributions make a difference for the trail. It's no secret that 2020 was a challenging year for the trail, as it was for most other aspects of life. In a year when many nonprofits, like businesses, struggled and or had to close their doors, the PCTA remained financially stable and continued our work, as you've learned here today, to protect and maintain the trail and support our community. And this resiliency is all because of you. Thanks to you, we made it through 2020 in a position of strength, and we're able to continue our work as we launch now into 2021. And we are ready to embrace new challenges alongside all of you. We always love when you share your stories with us about what the trail means to you, and I just want to share a few here today. From Virginia, thank you for this opportunity to hike the trail. I'm a 20-year Navy retired vet looking for my last adventure before I hang up my boots. From California, the Communicator magazine helped pass the time while COVID quarantine, and we're glad we could help. Also from California, we're a small group of old people doing virtual fitness challenges on our ellipticals and treadmills during COVID lockdown. Our little pack of elders has chosen the PCT as our next virtual hiking challenge. And from Belgium, hi guys. I thru hiked the PCT in 2018. Thank you for everything you do. It was the best time of my life. It's amazing everything you guys do for us hikers and future hikers that allows us to pursue our most profound goals. And through that journey, we get a better idea of what life really is, what it means, what's important and what's not. We always welcome your stories and we look forward to hearing more from you. Let's see, next slide. Thank you. So we were fortunate to have strong fundraising results in 2020, and we ended the year with 13,700 members from 50 states, the District of Columbia, and 32 countries. And as Liz already reported, you donated 2.7 million in private contributions. And so we just want to say thank you so much for your generosity. And there are so many ways that you give to support the trail with your donations. And membership donations, that's at the heart of our work. By joining and renewing each year, you provide that backbone of support for the trail. Many of you also double your giving through your employee matching gift programs, and we're so grateful that you take the time to take this extra step and make that possible. I want to say thank you also to all of our business supporters. Some of them are here today, and we have many corporate partners and business members who donate, and they also help us to spread the word about PCTA to their customers. And thank you to all of our generous foundations who provide key grants to support our work. And last but not least, I'd like to say many thanks to our Legacy Society members. These are the people who have included PCTA in their estate plans, and it's such a wonderful gift to ensure the future of the Pacific Crest Trail. If you'd like to learn more about any of these ways to give, please visit our website at pcta.org. Also, at any time, you can reach out to me directly. Next slide. In 2020, we said goodbye to our online PCTA store, and we heard from you that there is still a desire to buy PCT products while giving back. So we launched a new version of our shop page last fall that allows you to shop from our partners who give back a portion of sales. So I want to say thank you to all these partners and all of you who shop to benefit the trail. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for the important role you play in supporting our work, and may the coming year offer us all opportunities to connect with each other, with the healing power of nature and the beauty of the Pacific Crest Trail. I'm going to turn that back over to Jennifer Tripp now.
Great, thanks so much, Angie. We're going to roll into the awards portion of our presentation today. So each year, the PCTA honors extraordinary achievement, those who give their time and energy to the PCT, and who continually seek to protect, preserve, and promote this international treasure. Today, we'd like to take an opportunity to celebrate two of these remarkable supporters. First is Lee Terkelsen. Earlier this month, we presented Lee with PCTA's Lifetime Achievement Award. Lee was a PCTA board member from 1995 to 2000, editor of PCTA's Communicator magazine from 1995 to 2001, and most recently, lead judge for PCTA's annual photo contest. Every year for the last decade, Lee has volunteered his time and expertise to organize a committee of volunteer photo judges. They've reviewed thousands of photos that are submitted that portray the trail experience and the beauty of PCTA's land, or the PCT landscape. Our office is beautiful too, but the trail's a bit more beautiful. And then they select the winners. The winning photos are used in our magazine, our calendar, our promotional and advocacy materials, and they're an important symbol of our grassroots community heritage. On April 15th, we presented Lee with a Lifetime Achievement Award in thanks for his untiring dedication to the trail and the association. His decades of creativity and commitment as a PCTA board member, magazine editor, and lead judge for our photo contest set a high bar for promotion of the trail and the experience it provides. We thank him for inspiring generations of trail lovers through his work. Congratulations, Lee. And now I'll turn it back to Jack Haskel, who is here to recognize another extraordinary PCT and PCTA supporter.
I'm honored to call Lon Halfmile Cooper a friend and to tell you a little bit about the immense impact he's had on our community. And today he's the very first recipient of PCTA's Luminary Award, That's the first ever. We've never honored anyone with this yet. The award recognizes individuals and groups of people who've made an extraordinary contribution to the trail and the trail community. These awards inspire all those who love the PCT because they make the trail a better place. It's given to thank Lon for the many ways that he's given to the PCT. Lon's contributions are deeper than many of us first realized, but it all traces back to mapping the trail. And by the way, I see that Lon is attending today. That's great. Hi, Lon. Starting in 2007, Halfmile's mapping of the trail has kept people safe by knowing where they are and what's up ahead. This Halfmile map project, which involved other people helping him as well, has been a critical source of information for so many of us. It wasn't just free paper maps. For the first time, we all knew exactly where the trail was with a high degree of certitude. Because of Lon, we all know and speak in miles these days. We know for certain what's at mile 462.3. This exacting information is critical to protecting the trail, traveling it safely, and responding to emergencies. I talk with search and rescue, I talk with lost hikers, I talk with so many people who benefit directly from Lon Cooper's work. And Lon did this all for free, indeed paying his own way to map the trail and asking for donations to go to PCTA. He was much loved for his generosity, and through this, his financial contributions to PCTA and the PCT have been significant. Lon cares about all of you and that you all have good information. He's offered up his data to other map makers and guidebooks, again, only wanting to be generous and that they in turn donate to the trail. He's run the water report, he's worked as a trail maintainer, he's helped drive hikers to the southern terminus, provided Pacific Crest Trail news and water and kindness to hikers as they go north. Truly, Lon has set an example for so many of us as he gives back to the trail. He's a shining example of generosity and kindness and exemplifies a life lived connected to the PCT and with purpose to give back. I thank Lon for all that he's given and am honored to recognize his achievements with the first ever Luminary Award. So I know that Lon is often traveling around, so we made him something warm. Luminary Award, totally unique. Wear this with pride, Lon. And thank you for inspiring so many people with your kindness. Back to Liz, I think.
All right. Well, thank you to all the presenters and thank you to everybody who is here with us today. We do try to stick to the time allotted, and we are just, a minute past the hour. This is supposed to be the time that we address any questions. We have had questions come in, and 4 of those questions were answered in writing. So if you've asked a question, please check your screens for written answers. We still have 2 questions that have not been responded to yet. We will respond to those questions in writing as well because they're pretty specific questions about specific areas of the trail. And then we did have a comment come in, and the comment was well-deserved awards, especially to Lon. Thank you for all of your work. So thanks for that nice comment. So with that, that concludes our annual meeting. And again, thank you for your support. Thank you for attending. And I hope that I get to connect with many of you in person this year, either on the trail or in another beautiful location.